From the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from the virtual grill room of the St. Francis Yacht Club. We hope that you and yours are sheltering in place in a comfortable environment, and we look forward to welcoming you back in our yacht club just as soon as conditions permit. One of the benefits of Zoom technology is that we can interview speakers from all over the world. In this particular case, we're talking to a professional sailor in Florida right now. He's an internationally recognized professional sailor. Dee Smith founded Dee Smith Racing in 1988 and became a professional sailor and racing consultant thereafter, racking up over 35 years of international experience with many of the top sailors and campaigns in the world. While competing with an America's Cup Challenger syndicate in 2007, Dee was diagnosed with stage 4, you heard me, stage 4 cancer, a condition that seriously impacted his spine. Dee was given less than a year to live by his doctors, but with reduced mobility, he was able to beat the odds. A subsequent bicycle accident permanently injured one of his legs. Classified as a Paralympic-class competitor in 2015, Dee just missed a medal in the 2016 Games in Rio de Janeiro. Dee's here today to review the important question: should sailing return to future Paralympic Games? Dee Smith, longtime bud, great sailor. Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be on the show, and I wish I was there having lunch with you soon.
So Dee, we all remember that you came up during the time of Black Collar and K-Yard and Madrigali, and you were a competitor with some of the dominant high-profile sailors of the day in the Bay Area, and you are one of those who pioneered the whole game of professional sailing. You got picked up by syndicates around the world, and you ended up traveling all over the world, literally. I remember seeing you one time in London. I'm going through Heathrow, and there's Dee Smith off to go racing. What was the very first boat you were ever on? Any kind of boat, not just a sailboat. What was the very first boat you can remember being on?
Well, the first boat was an El Toro in Vasona Lake when my dad bought one of those when I was 11, I think, and went for sails and things like that. Never really raced or anything. Year later, he was a big guy, so a year later he couldn't really do anything in an El Toro. He ended up buying this little 24-foot keel boat, and we started sailing in Santa Cruz in 1965 when the boat was new, and he never sailed anything like that. He's been sailing a few times, but nothing like what we were about to venture off to. And I was 12, and we took the boat out of the harbor for the first time ever with a main and a jib, and we raced. And that race ended up teaching me so much about everything and how to deal with it. I mean, it was just him and me, and we go around the weather mark back with the also rans and, not doing very good. And the Angelita, a beautiful 12-meter that I saw in Newport last summer, beautiful boat, was off, and they were running down towards Soquel, and the K-40, Norm Lesen's boat, jibed and went toward the harbor. And my dad kind of goes, "What's he doing?" And I go, "Well, looks like he's going into the harbor." And he goes, "Well, wait a minute." He put the marks out. "You see anything in there?" And I got the binoculars out, and I had eagle eyes when I'm 12 years old. And well, there's a flag on a stick in there by the beach. And he goes, "Jibe." So we jibe over. We were second around the mark. The Angelita passed us before the finish. So we corrected out on everybody who won the race. And it taught me, keep your eyes open. Everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. You can beat anybody. All you have to do is see and understand. And when you're 12, that was a huge lesson. And that's the way I approached all my sailing, all my business, all my everything is just keep your eyes open. Don't be surprised and just keep going. That really set me up to be the tactician who I became and whatnot. And there's all sorts of other people like Tom and Black Collar and all those Lowell Norris and Dick Beavers and those people when that were established when I was young, and going on from there, and then going out and racing against them. You know, the Beetlejuice was a big deal. That was the Cal 29 my dad bought in 1970, and we took it down to, well, we bought it in Costa Mesa and put it together there, and him and myself, and I think, what was I, 18, I guess, and my mom and my little brother and my little sister, we raced it from Marina del Rey to San Diego. And it was kind of windy, and we beat all the Cal 40s in boat for boat. We set it in a what was the thing? Morph, MORF down there, right? Time record that has never been broken, mainly because they moved the finish line to outside the bay. We finished at Ballast Point, and we passed the last Cal 40 100 yards before the finish. It was unbelievable. The boat was great. We won a lot of races.
What kind of boat was Beetlejuice?
At Cal 29.
She was a Cal 29, but you were beating the Cal 40s.
Yeah, we beat them all. There was like 6 or 8 of them in the race. Yeah, and so we raced it against Improbable. I remember passing Improbable, leaving the bay, going around the Farallones, and there was no wind, and we're drifting, and we sail right through their lee. Little stupid things like that you remember. After my father passed away in 1972, I ended up keeping the boat. It ended up being my house. Lived on it, moved around and worked at different jobs with that, kept sailing it. Involved with Chris Corlett and Bill Carter, Tom Wiley and Don Peters, in Alameda, and they were building boats and all this stuff. And they built the Animal Farm. This is really where I decided what I wanted to do with life. We went off to La Rochelle, France to do the Half-Ton Cup. This was after we won the NAs in Corpus Christi, put it on a ship, sent it over there, and I just fell in love with Europe. It just felt like home, and I just loved being away and world-class competition. How could you not like it? And I think I just basically said, I want to race boats around the world and race against the best and get better and beat them if I can, and that's kind of really what set me off. So anytime anybody asked me to travel, I was always there.
Talk about Animal Farm. It was a seminal.
Well, Tom Wiley built it. Everybody worked on it. I mean, back then it was like, you get on a boat, you're building it, you're sanding it, you're finishing it, you're, sailing it too. You're terribly, totally involved with the boat from start to finish. The stories that I have from that trip are amazing because there were 42 boats. We were kids. We didn't know what we were doing. I was the bow person, and I actually do have a picture of it. Animal Farm was a single skin fiberglass boat, half-ton, 28-footer. It was one of the prototypes that the Hawk Farms came from, Hawkeye and Animal Farm, Hawk Farm. And we raced it as a half-tonner in Europe, in America, always did well. This is a copy of a French yachting magazine from 1974. I'm 22 here, and this is me here because I was the bow person. And you can tell how good of a job I did on the bow when I left the bag like that.
You're in the orange phthalates?
No, I'm sitting on the rail.
Okay.
This is Steve Fletcher, Chris Corlett, and myself. But that's the boat sailing in La Rochelle. And the series for us were quite interesting. 2 things happened. One, in one of the short races, we were doing quite well. We had a port starboard. We cleared the guy by 2 boat lengths, and he said protest. We went in and got penalized. And that was a big eye-opener to what people can do and how people sail in other parts of the world. For some reason, I think that boat was French. And we didn't have, obviously you don't have a chance to win that one. He says one thing, unless you have a witness, you're not going to win. The other experience was actually the long distance race, which we ended up the furthest distance away from La Rochelle, 2-night race. And we got hit by a full-on gale in the Bay of Biscay. And they're famous. And I have never experienced anything like it. And I can attest to all the time I spent in the Southern Ocean and stuff. It was amazing. Out of the 42 boats that started, 8 finished. 1 boat got rolled over. There were all sorts of stories. We ended up winning the race by 7 minutes.
How much breeze was there?
Gust to 60, but the waves were worse. The waves were, 30, 40 feet with freak waves on top of them. We would actually stop the boat and let the wave go by and sail for 2 to 3 minutes through the white cap foam. We were sailing with, we took the jib down a couple times. And actually, I probably witnessed the best tactical move I've ever seen in my life. And that was, we were sailing in kind of a little triangle. North Star, who won the regatta with Peter Barrett and Eckhart Wagner aboard, was ahead, about 1.5 miles ahead of us. And to leeward, half a mile ahead was Ron Holland with Tom Wiley sailing with him. They were all friends back then. And to weather a little bit ahead was Peter Norland and his Scampi. And then we were the trailing boat. And we were going on a 50-mile leg holding 20 degrees high of course for drift. And we would have probably held higher, except for that's as high as we could sail into the wind. And it wasn't fun. Nobody wanted to tack. Starboard tack, we had to go past the mark, a mark that we couldn't recognize. Norland was the only one that was close enough to recognize it. And we were supposed to go to this other mark, but we couldn't see. It was like another 4 miles away. And that was the last mark till you go into downwind into La Rochelle. And North Star was ahead, couldn't see the real mark, didn't know where they were because obviously no GPS, no Loran, no nothing. It was, dead reckoning. And, in that kind of condition, you don't know if you're going to be dead or you're going to reckon you're going to be okay. It's kind of hard. And so anyway, Norland all of a sudden tacks. And Eckhart and Peter go, oh, okay, we got to go back. So they turn around, start reaching back toward the mark because they can see it, but they didn't think it was the proper one. And you couldn't see the boats unless you were both on top of the waves. The waves were too big, right? So we finally tack. We didn't want to tack, but we finally tack. And as we're tacking, we kind of get a glimpse, because we're the closest to Norland, of where he's coming from, and realize he never went around the mark, but he put a jib out and wing, and he started running straight downwind toward La Rochelle. And we all kind of looked at it and go, he didn't go around the mark. It's not the mark, So we tack right back and we go off to where the proper mark's supposed to be. We're on this leg for 8 hours, right? So, we don't know where we are because the currents change so quickly there. And he brought all 4 boats within 2 or 3 boat lengths going around this next mark. And he did it on purpose in a full-on gale. I couldn't believe that. It was amazing. So we ended up going wing, and we sailed away, and we ended up winning the race. And that was like the big thing. We ended up beating North Star in that series 4 out of 5 races. We ended up 5th because of that DSQ, or it wasn't a DSQ, but it was a penalty. We lost like 20 points or something like that. And but that was a big lesson, and I just knew that I wanted to sail, and I just loved Europe. Then another good boat back in that day, after I started aloft, which kind of is dear to my heart, is Summertime Dream. Carl Shoemaker's design, his first boat. He was nervous as hell, because he went out and built the boat for himself to make a name out of himself. And he goes, could you do the North Americans with me? And this is when I was in the loft, and I said, well, let me go sailing with you and see what the boat's like. And we went for a sail, and I go, you don't have to worry. We're going to win the North Americans easily. This is a great boat. And he kind of was, no. And I go, no, we'll win, no problem. And I think we had straight first in the series or something like that. The boat was quick. He was great to sail with, as always, and surely miss that man. He was one of the best that we've had in our industry and in the Bay Area, for sure. Dennis Choate built the Summertime Dream in LA, and it was a 26-foot quarter tonner. And we won the quarter ton North Americans in San Francisco. And then I started my loft, obviously, in 1980 in Oakland, California. And that was probably my best experience in getting going. And of course, the best boat that is probably famous to everybody is this one here, which is Scarlett O'Hara. This is during the Kenwood Cup in, I'm going to say it was 84, Molokai race. And, you know, that boat, sailing in the SORC in 83 with Chris as skipper and myself, Skip Allen, all sorts of guys, Dave Hulse. This is a Serendipity 43 that Tom Blackhaller had the year before. We took it over. Unfortunately, Tom didn't do so well with it, but we ended up winning almost everything with it. And those are some of my sails. Actually, I have to attest, the blooper is a North sail. That's Tommy's. But the main, the staysail's a North sail, but the spinnaker's mine. And I used to design all the sails and do all sorts of stuff. And we had a lot of really, really good success in the big boat IOR market on the Bay Area and around the world, actually, supplying sails to Europe and other places, because I kept trying to get back to Europe. And this is when I started sailing much more internationally with the success from Scarlett O'Hara and Bravura. And that was the first time I did the Admiral's Cup was in 1983 with Scarlett O'Hara, right after we won the SORC. And we were the top inshore boat in the Solent.
Now here you are, kind of like upstart kid from California West Coast, and you go into the Royal Yacht Squadron at Cowes. Talk a little bit about your first impressions of the Admiral's Cup and Cowes, etc. Royalty.
Going to England to sail the Admiral's Cup was an experience on itself. 45 boats on the line, different people from all over the world, but they never let the little hippie from California into the RORC.
Royal Yacht Squadron?
Yeah, I mean, you know, they wouldn't let the riffraff in, and it was kind of funny. I didn't get in there till we won the Queen's Cup, which was before the 87 Admiral's Cup, and I was sailing on Mean Machine with the Dutch. I was always into the sailing. I never worried too much about the politics and stuff, and maybe I should have done a little bit more politicking or whatever you want to call it. But we ended up closing the loft in 87. It was kind of hard to keep it going. I was traveling a lot. Actually, 90% of our work in 87 was in Europe. So it kind of led me to believe that it was kind of hard to keep a loft busy in Oakland. So I ended up moving to Italy. In 1988, it became legal to go pro. And I went to go pro. And this is Morning Glory on San Francisco Bay, I believe.
Yeah, I went sailing on Morning Glory with you in those days.
Yeah, Hasso Plattner. Well, he was my first client as a pro sailor. This was the second boat I built for him. We built this in McConaughey's in Sydney, which was great because in 1989, when I did my first Hobart race, I met my wife, and she's Australian. So we got to go to the northern beaches above Sydney and build a boat for months. And I got to meet great guys like John and McConaughey and Simon Grosser and stuff, and learned so much about, you know, high-tech boat building.
Talk about the Fat Morning Glory, the one we're looking at there, because I've sailed in a couple of Morning Glories. And which one?
Oh yeah, there's a few. So this one we built there, and this color is now a all grip color, and it's called Morning Glory Blue. You can buy that from them. And this boat was built to win the Cape Town to Rio race. Hasso had his house in Cape Town. His mother was living there. Apartheid was just over. And this was like the first international open event out of Cape Town. It's funny when you go and you build a boat, you can think about so many things, and working with the great designers around the world, and you push them a little bit here and there, and then you make compromises all along, because every boat's a compromise. It's great to be able to do that. One, to be in on the beginning of the conception of the boat, working with the designer, and then sailing it, for a year or two, winning a lot of races. And the next boat, which I think is probably the nicest boat that I've ever sailed on, is this one, which is the big Morning Glory, the 86-footer, cannon keel. And in this picture, you can see this spinnaker pole. We built it in 2003. This would have been the third one, I think, that he owned, the Maxi 86. This is identical design to Paiwacket back then.
Yeah.
We put this boat together and we did a fast delivery over to New Zealand, put the boats on a dockwise ship and shipped them to Fort Lauderdale, sailed them to Antigua, and I think this is where this picture was taken. Second real race that we were in. And that pole was a beast, 90 kilos. That pole weighed 14 meters long.
So how long would it take to get the keel, the can, all the way from the port side and the port deck over to the starboard side and the starboard deck?
Okay, we're talking 106 degrees total, and probably between 15 and 18 seconds. And the motor is running all the time. We don't have a generator to do this. The primary engine, which is like a couple hundred horsepower, right? About that size. And it's running at high RPMs when you engage the hydraulics.
What's the size of the crew? You have 24. How many people?
Yeah, approximately 22. You don't need too many, except for you do need 5 guys on the bow to move that pole around if the waves are 10 feet, 12 feet like they were. But the boat would just sail around at 13, 14 knots upwind, 25, 30 knots downwind. I remember in the what race was that? The Cork sailing week, that so we get around the windward mark, and Soapy goes, okay, 2 minutes on starboard, 2.5 minutes on port. That's the time. And then we're at the leeward mark. So 4.5 minute run. Well, it was scary, but it never lost a race in a year. The other thing that was really quite the start of this thing is we saved 25% of the weight of the mast in the rigging, because we were like the first maxi to put on PBO rigging. The rig with the PBO rigging was still a ton. Okay, because it's 130 feet off the water. It's not small. And then if you have a cannon keel, the riding moment of the boat just goes up, by exponential amounts. And, the other thing that was quite interesting that I couldn't understand, we're sailing upwind at 13.5 knots. Waves were 12 to 15 feet. It's blowing 20. We got 35 knots across the deck, right? And I could stand on the deck. And I sitting there going, this is the smoothest boat I've ever sailed on. You would just get whipped on a normal boat, right? The keel sticking out 53 degrees when you're heeling 25 degrees, we're 75 degrees, we're almost horizontal. And we used to call it, in that condition, about freeing Willie, and that's when the bulb would come out of the water through the waves. We don't like to do that because it's a lot of drag when it comes out. But the keel ends up being a wing, horizontal wing. And all of a sudden we had these soft landings. We'd be just launching off these big waves, and it would just come down so slow and smooth that I could stand on the deck without a problem. Prelude to everything that's been happening in the last 20 years, I witnessed 20 years ago. So that was probably my favorite project to manage the build of that and the design of it and all that, and then to go out and win a bunch of races. We set a lapse time record on the Bermuda race with the boat, just over 48 hours. And the first 24 hours, we only did 200 miles.
So you were hauling the mail for the second 24 hours.
Yeah, we did 430 miles the second day. 1997, we won the Admiral's Cup for the US. And the only other time they won, I think it was 68. It was 3 boats, 2 of them I was running, and one was Jameson. This is during the Kenwood Cup, but this little guy is the boat. This is Sayonara. And this is the Jameson Mum 36. We won our class in that regatta, I'm pretty sure. And I took a lot of seconds in the worlds with the Mum 36. I think I took 4 of them.
The Japanese symbol of the spinnaker, that is Sayonara.
Yeah.
This is Larry Ellison's Sayonara, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great boat. Very successful.
Yeah.
Along with Jameson, we had the MK Cafe. This is the MK Cafe right after we built it in Poland. It's a Udal Vrolik ILC 40. In 97, they used the ILCs as one of the classes. They have Mum 36, ILC, and then they had a 50-foot section.
Talk about a program, a 40-footer like this. How long is the program going to take from concept through, shipping it to its first regatta?
Well, this was a very unique case. They brought me in early to help train the crew, on their old 1-tonner, and then this boat was being built, and I looked at it. They showed it to me, and it was just a hull, a deck sitting on top, an engine and a crate inside the boat, no keel, no mast, no nothing. And we're supposed to be in Athens doing the IOC Worlds in 4 weeks. But the Polish people are just amazing, and there'd be a guy standing behind another guy because he had the screwdriver and he was waiting for the screwdriver.
Yeah, right.
He didn't have any tools. I call up my buddy who's in a Dutch guy that I sailed a bunch with that had a tool company send us tools. I mean, you do all this and just trying to, manage making sure stuff would arrive on time and just to help them get it done. And they were so resourceful. But this is an Antonov plane that we put the boat in and flew it to Athens to get there for the race.
In this particular case, how long would this boat be from concept to delivery?
This boat probably took 4 months.
Really? From
5 months? Yeah, it's kind of, this thing was built almost like Iconlop used to build boats. Just boom, here you go.
Hanging out.
Because it really only took them, they probably started building it a month before I got there. And we finished it in 3 weeks.
You'd function as kind of an overall project supervisor. How do you relate to the owner? What does he expect of you?
It's kind of as needed. I mean, every project needs something else. A lot of times you drop into a program, they don't even know what they need until you get into it.
Educate our audience about how a pro would structure his compensation in a program like this.
Well, of course, everybody's a little bit different. Most of us pros, when we're sailing, get paid per day. Some people charge for travel. I never really did. And then you have the management side, depending on which part that you manage. I mean, back in this day, the people who put these boats together, like myself, weren't specialized in anything, but we had a very good knowledge of everything. Now you end up getting different specialty people to do their job, and hopefully it all comes together and goes right. Some of these sailors that are out there now really don't have the same engineering and design knowledge that we did back then. It's just because of their sailing has been more specialized.
Talk about the evolution of when you get in the accident and then you decide you can come back, but you got to do it on a Paralympic basis. Tell us how that evolved.
All right. Well, the story was 2006. I was hired to be the general manager of the Sociologe America's Cup Challenge, which is from South Africa. It was a great experience. I was part-time, though, not full-time. So I was still racing my other pro deals. I'm kind of a fix-it guy. I roll into a program, I find out what's wrong, and hopefully we make them win, and then I move on to the next project. I don't roll with my own, clad of people and trimmers and things like that a lot of people do and love them and leave them. I'm kind of more of a teacher, leave it better than it was in a place that they could learn from. I'm very proud of my South Africans. A lot of them are pro now on the circuit and they're doing quite well. But anyway, I wasn't feeling right. And it took me a while with the doctors in Spain, and I was out of America. So I had no American insurance. I got checked out, took 3 months, finally got an MRI on my back. And the doctor came to my house and said, "You got to go home." My whole L2 was black. You know how the bones look white? It was black. It was a tumor that encased my whole L2. And they didn't know where it was from or anything like that. With this tumor, I had the operation, found out that it was stage 4 cancer. It was not a benign tumor. Spent a little time in Spain, realized I had to go home. I got into Hopkins, amazing doctors, put me on some experimental drugs. It kicked the cancer out of me. I'm okay. Back's a little damaged. So fast forward to 2013, riding the bike from Tiburon to the base, the New Zealand base in San Francisco. I got clipped by a car on Broadway and Embarcadero. Guy turned right in front of me and didn't have a blinker on, couldn't see me. I was in the bike lane. Anyway, that injury, I tried to get through it. I ended up with a total collapse of my spine. And now I have an 8-level fusion in my back. Anyway, it's fixed. It's solid. It's pretty hard to see behind myself. So I didn't know what I was going to do in 2014. End of 2014, I didn't know if I was going to be able to sail anymore. And so I went and saw my buddy Grant Spanik, AKA Fuzz, who was one of the major coaches on the US Olympic Cup team. And I tried to help them in tactics and strategy, the team, because they seemed to lack in that area. He says, "Well, that'd be great, but you should sail." And I go, "Wait a minute, I'm an old guy now. I'm 60 something, right?" And so he goes, "Well, I didn't say Olympics, I said Paralympics." And I go, "Well, wait a minute, I'm not broken." And he goes, "I think you qualify." I didn't know. So I looked into it, and sure enough, I qualified. The 2.4 is a minimum handicap disability thing. And the Paralympians are rated in different levels, and it's kind of a physical therapy rating system. And an able body would be an 8. And to sail a 2.4, you have to be a 7. And if you're in a wheelchair, you're around a 4, kind of thing. Well, my first rating was a 4, and I got rated as a 5. That's how limited my back is and stuff to the rule. And that doesn't mean I'm limited on a boat, because I can still sail. And I have 2 hands and 2 feet. So in that way, I have a bit of an advantage to the people who don't have a hand or in a wheelchair. But I can't turn around. I can't see what's behind me. And so I got other limitations. And I got into it to see what it was like. And sailing in the US, it wasn't very hard to win. And I didn't think it was going to be a very challenging thing, and I wasn't thinking of doing it. And then Bill Shore told me, "Oh, I think you'd probably be about 7th compared to the guys in Europe." And I kind of went, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah." So I had to go over to France to get internationally measured. So I borrowed a boat, went to Hyères. So this is a 2.4 sailing in Mallorca and one of the pre-Olympic regattas. It is a 2.4 meter rated boat, just like a 12 meter, a 6 meter, an 8 meter it's to the international rule. So the boats are about 13.8 feet long, and they weigh 250 kilos, 500 pounds. They're narrow, they're wet. You can swamp, which I have, but they're very incredibly tactical boats to sail. They tack in 65, 72 degrees. A wind shift means a lot. Boat speed, they're all the same. So I went over to here. I got my ass kicked. And I think I took 10th. When I bought my first boat out of Finland, I had a ship to Rama, and they had the open worlds there, and 107 boats.
Mhm.
And it was quite a regatta. I ended up,
100, D, you said 107 boats.
yeah.
Oh, macaroni.
Oh, it's a real class. I mean, it's like an incredibly competitive class.
Yeah.
And I have to say, there is this one guy in the Paralympics that I have not beaten in any of the regattas. And I have beaten the best at least once everywhere else, the Coots, the Gaillards, the Kostekis, all the French guys, all the Europeans, everything. I've always been able to beat him, sail with him and beat him. But this guy, I have not beaten. So I went ahead and jumped in with both feet right then and there.
How much is a boat? What would a boat cost? How long is one of these races in a little 2.4?
An hour. I remember the first race I did, I started sailed 15 minutes and I still couldn't see the mark. You're so low in the water, you can't see anything. The races we do around here, they're short. They're 40 minutes long and you can see everything because it's flat water. This is just off of Punta Gorda, Charlotte Harbor. I'm number 7.
How do you hike out inside this thing?
You just lean out. You lean up. You can't get out of the boats. It's illegal to get out of the boats. Okay. And you steer with your feet. They don't have spinnakers, but they do have a pole. I think I have a little bit more twist, yeah, for sure. And I'm pointing a little bit higher. You can see my jib kind of inverted. It's blowing pretty hard there.
Yeah.
And I think my mast is bent more.
Exactly.
And I have a lot more head stay tension. I have custom rigs. I designed, there's a lot of freedom in the boat as far as what you can do to it, mainly because handicapped people sail it, disabled people sail it. So you have to customize some of the gear so you can physically sail it. Some of the little things that I've done, you can't really tell, but my crane is built out of carbon. My spreaders are carbon. The mast is obviously aluminum. My shrouds, you can't tell, but they're rod. Most shrouds are not. His spreaders are in these, pivoting spreaders and stainless steel brackets.
Yeah.
And whatnot. And his mast weighs more and bends more, and the head stay sags a lot more. So there's all sorts of things, and my sheets are in. And I mean, basically, I took all my knowledge from keel boats because it's a keel boat.
Yeah.
And I just threw it at it, and I still work on the boat all the time.
So this is the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro.
This is tune-up for the Paralympics. And this is across the bay from Rio, and I can't tell which boat I'm in because, as you can see, they're both USA 7. But my tuning partner and coach at this time was Jeff Madrigali.
So what's this boat to the right that kind of looks like a 6-meter?
That is Torben and Lars Grail's 6-meter that their father raced in the Olympics and I believe won a gold.
Wow. Holy cow.
He came out and I noticed him and he turned down to us and we had this lovely sail for about, 20, 30 minutes together. And he just came out to say hello. It was just fantastic. Wow. And that was like a month and a half before the Paralympics. I was down there quite a bit. I would spend 3 weeks down there and then come home. And I tried to learn real, like I know San Francisco Bay, which I think I was able to do. The problem was, this is a terrible thing to say, but the drugs, my cancer drugs affect my mind and it cost me a medal. And that's the sad thing. Now I am completely off all cancer drugs and other drugs, and I'm sailing a lot better again. It's kind of nice. This is in Rio with my game sales, obviously all signed up. This was a little practice I tried to do by myself because I didn't want anybody to see this jib.
Yeah, so your main is way forward. You let the back stay way off.
Oh, yeah. I found out in the 2.4 rule, there was no rule for left length. So what I did was I lengthened the jib, and going upwind, the Cunningham is down to the deck. And then I let the Cunningham off downwind, and I end up with about a half a meter more sail area down here.
Got you.
And this whole bottom section is free. During the Olympics, see this little batch of fog up here on top of Sugarloaf?
Yeah.
I was up there during all of the Olympics watching the races.
Who's fast in the 2.4 at the Olympics 2016? Who was fast? You took fourth.
This guy won the gold.
Okay.
French.
Yep.
Who is now has just finished the Vendée on a Mocha and has a new Mocha with boards, and he's out in the ocean right now off of France doing that 1,000-mile thing. This guy is the guy I can't beat. I won this race. I actually won more races than anybody else.
Okay.
During the event, but my other problems made my mind cloudy, and I had a couple other problems. So this is after the games. Damien, gold, silver, Australia. Helena was bronzed, just beat me. And myself, we went into the last race. If I got 2 points on him, I would have beaten him.
Yeah.
And Helena was pretty much, we were racing for bronze actually, but Helena ended up last in the medal race. And then there was another race that, I went around the top mark, overlapped with Matt in first place, put my pedal down to turn, and the rudder line broke. Wow. Leading the race.
Okay.
And I ended up finishing the race by holding the line that comes from behind, right? And I'm just steering one way. I could use the pedal on the other side, but this side wasn't. And I ended up 8th. And if I would have won that race, I would have been gold.
People need to know you don't use a tiller. You steer with pedals on your feet, right?
Yeah. So you have a little quadrant in the back on the rudder. 2 lines come from the back behind you, forward, down to pedals, and you push, pull kind of thing. And that's how you steer the boat. Matt doesn't have any legs. He's in a chair. Okay. He has a tiller. And the lines come up to a little quadrant right in front of you, and you steer this way.
So how long did you practice before the games in the 2.4?
Well, I would say 1.5 years. This is just a beautiful picture. This was in Finland. This is the first time I sailed my boat. It was brand new. Anyway, so somewhere 2014-15, sailing in the Paralympics was kicked out. It was kicked out for a reason of bad management by the ISDF, never answering any questions from the International Paralympic Committee. I got in knowing that Rio was going to be the last sailing event in the Paralympics.
Okay, got it. Okay.
I kind of went in going, okay, well, what the hell? Spend 1.5 years and see what happens. And the whole idea was to try to help the Olympic team. So I thought, well, how else could I help but to learn from the inside of what it was all about and what the problems were and what the situations were that could be improved on. In 2017, the Paralympic Worlds were in Kiel, and I chartered a boat and went, and trying to promote the idea of getting sailing back into the Paralympics. Then in 2018, the Paralympic Worlds were in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, right? And so I went up there, and we were told we needed 32 countries at our Worlds to be reestablished for Paris.
Okay.
So a lot of people came. And
for the 2024 games.
Yeah. And for the Paris, Marseille, to get reinstated.
Yeah.
2 days before the regatta started, we heard that they've already made a decision, even though we had 39 countries that arrived at that regatta. Okay. And that was my best world championship in the 2.4. I ended up 3rd. Matt Bug won, and Damien was second. I was third. And so that was the last time I sailed against those guys.
What's the likelihood that the Paralympics will be added back to Olympic sailing?
It's hard to say. It could be 5% for all I know. If the IPC doesn't want us to be in there, we're not going to be in there. The work that World Sailing is doing, I would say, would be 90%. They really are working the problem very hard. They're trying to keep everybody sailing, which is very difficult because since sailing's gotten pulled, a lot of countries don't have the funds to send teams to World Championships. And because of that, you don't get the participation, you don't get the 39 countries. It's kind of hard to say it. Then you have COVID happened, and then nobody's sailing or doing anything, and that hurts too. So it's really, really hard. But we have been working hard at it. World Sailing has done a lot, but we're not the only sport. We have competition, and the competition is just as fierce, if not fiercer, and they're organized. So even if the IPC doesn't allow sailing back in, LA Olympics, Paralympics, I believe, can say sailing is in.
So the LAOC could say we're going to add sailing back to the Paralympic Games.
At least this time, and it might be a test event kind of thing.
For our audience, remind people when the LA Games will be.
2028 in Long Beach is where they're going to be sailing. It'll be a great Olympics and Paralympics if we can do that. The real thing that bugs me about how the Paralympic sailing has gone since 2016 Rio Games is they've dumbed down the boats. And I myself am worried that if we are allowed to be in it, they'll be using boats that I would never think about getting into because they're not technical, they're not at the top of the game. If you're a sailor in the Paralympics, you're supposed to be the best of the best.
Right.
You should have boats that are the best of the best.
With super sensitive boats with lots of strings, you're saying.
It's just logical. The 2.4 is a good technical boat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other boats that they're talking about, and they're talking that maybe they won't put the 2.4 in.
Okay.
And
So
it's not easy to get a boat for a handicapped group. It's just not. I should say disabled group, but it's a hard thing. Everybody sails so equally in the 2.4.
Mm-hmm.
Able bodies have a hard time beating disabled, and disabled people. Everybody's equal because you can't hike out.
It's been great listening to a professional career that took an incredibly innovative turn as you got older and you raced in the Paralympic Games in Rio de Janeiro in 2016 and took fourth, for goodness sakes, almost medal. And you've discussed how there's no possibility that the Paralympic sailing event will happen in 2024 in Marseille for the Paris Games, but you're saying it's a 50-50 shot. We'll have Paralympic Games in the 2028 in Los Angeles. It's been great spending time with you on the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge, your insights, and your really fascinating career, Dee. Thanks so much for being our guest.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It kind of reminds me of all the things I've done, and it's been a crazy ride, and it's amazing to be able to experience it all and love your club. Been there, for 50 some years, and yeah, great place to sail. Wonderful people.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you, Dee. And with that, we adjourn the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.